Welcome to episode 22 of the Resurrection Podcast. I am Acusio Bivona. I want to run a high-level stress test on your baseline today. Imagine it's Tuesday morning. You wake up, and by some massive, unforeseen market event, your equity is gone. The liquid capital is drained. The company valuation is zero. The title you spent the last 15 years building has been stripped away. You're standing in your living room with absolutely nothing but your physical body, your character, and your internal presence. Who is the man left standing? When your wife looks at you, without the sprawling house, without the luxury vacations, without the financial security you provide, does she deeply respect the man she sees? When your peers look at you without the leverage of your checkbook, do they still follow your lead? For many high-earning operators, removing the capital exposes a terrifying reality. The money has been doing all the lifting. You've used your net worth as a biological exoskeleton. You've let the capital project your power, demand your respect, and absorb your friction. Today, we're going to audit the founder's trap. We're going to look at the physiological cost of outsourcing your strength to your P&L, and we are going to map out how to build a man who is incredibly formidable with or without the money. We need to look at the biomechanics of how this trap is built. It's actually a very natural biological adaptation to success. Your brain and your central nervous system are highly efficient. They're always looking to conserve metabolic energy. When you first started the business, generating revenue was a tool for survival. But as the numbers scaled, your brain realized something profound. Money is the ultimate friction bypass. It takes a massive amount of metabolic energy and internal composure to navigate a deep foundational conflict with your wife. It's incredibly easy to just find a luxury trip to smooth things over. It takes significant physical discipline to build a strong kinetic chain, optimize your testosterone, and walk into a room projecting genuine physical authority. It's much easier to just buy a $40,000 watch and let the metal do the talking. Your biology adapted to the path of least resistance. You built an exoskeleton of capital to protect a physical and emotional infrastructure that was slowly atrophying underneath. When you rely on this exoskeleton, your nervous system outsources its security to the market. A healthy, sovereign man regulates his nervous system based on his internal capability. His baseline is secure because he knows his physical body and his mind can handle whatever the environment dictates. But when you're tethered to the capital, a dip in Q3 revenue doesn't just register as a business problem. It registers as a biological threat to your actual existence. Because you are the money, a threat to the money is a threat to your life. Your endocrine system dumps cortisol into your bloodstream, and you experience the exact same physiological panic as a man being hunted. You live in a state of chronic, low-level vigilance. You're exhausted, not from the physical labor of your day, but from the massive energy required to keep the financial armor intact. This physiological adaptation manifests in highly predictable patterns. High-earning men deploy this financial armor in different ways. So let's look at the telemetry of the men caught in the founder's trap so you can identify if this software is running in your own background. First, we have the leverage operator. This is the founder who uses his net worth to ensure compliance in his environment. He surrounds himself with employees, vendors, and even family members who are financially dependent on him. He treats relationships as logistical transactions where he holds the ultimate leverage. When he speaks, the room agrees with his logic, purely because he holds the keys to the treasury. The biological reality of this archetype is profound isolation. His nervous system is constantly scanning for betrayal because, on a primal level, he knows that loyalty purchased with capital can always be outbid. He operates without true peers, surrounding himself only with dependents, which keeps his sympathetic nervous system in a constant state of defense. Then we have the compensating provider. This is the executive who recognizes his lack of physical and emotional presence at home and attempts to balance the ledger with capital. He works 80 hours a week. His kinetic chain is entirely locked up from stress. He's metabolically depleted by the time he pulls into the driveway. To compensate for being a ghost in his own home, he writes massive checks. He funds the private schools, the renovations, the cars. He's actively paying severance to his own family while he still lives under the same roof, hoping his financial utility will substitute for his masculine presence. When his wife eventually pulls away, because female biology responds to physical presence and leadership, not just a bank routing number, he feels betrayed. He points to the lifestyle he funded, completely missing the fact that he provided the capital but withheld the man. Both of these operators are highly successful on paper, but both are quietly terrified of the exact same question. Who am I without the money? Every artificial structure eventually faces a calibration. The environment will test the foundation. I see this constantly in my coaching. A founder successfully exits his company, or a macroeconomic shift completely changes his leverage. He steps down from the board, or he hands the daily operations over to a new CEO. The massive daily cash flow slows down, and the title is removed from his email signature. When the financial armor comes off, the underlying physiological structure is forced to bear the weight of his reality. If you spent the last decade using capital to solve your problems, your emotional and physical infrastructure hasn't been challenged. Like any underutilized muscle, it naturally atrophies. When the exoskeleton is removed, your central nervous system recognizes that the underlying tissue is underdeveloped. And the physiological response is immediate. The body enters a state of metabolic stress. His testosterone naturally dips, and systemic inflammation rises. His marriage often experiences friction because his wife is finally face to face with the man underneath the armor, and she realizes he's completely exhausted. But this is a massive opportunity. A structural calibration isn't a failure. It's a diagnostic revelation. When the armor cracks, you finally have clear access to the foundation. You can see exactly where the genuine intrinsic strength needs to be built. You have the leverage to initiate this rebuild yourself right now on your own terms. We do this by intentionally stepping outside the exoskeleton. You actively place yourself in environments where your capital has absolutely zero utility. You return to the raw reality of your biological capability. Step onto a jiu-jitsu mat. Get under a heavy barbell. Commit to a deeply demanding physical endurance event. In these environments, your bank account holds no currency. Your executive title holds no leverage against gravity. You can't write a check to buy your way out of physical exhaustion. You're forced to confront the absolute truth of your physical readiness and your mental composure. Excuse me. When you demand physical resilience from your body and rebuild your kinetic chain, your nervous system undergoes a profound adaptation. It registers that you are the primary asset. Your brain shifts its security anchor from your investment portfolio directly into your own physical capability. You train your body to process stress, adapt to it, and remain completely composed. You reclaim your metabolic energy. And as a result, your presence fundamentally changes. You project power intrinsically. You project it through your posture, your resting heart rate, and your unwavering eye contact. You become a man who is incredibly formidable, not because of what he owns, but because of what he physically and emotionally embodies. Let me give you the exact telemetry of a founder who executed this rebuild. Robert, 52 years old. He built and sold a massive commercial real estate portfolio. For 20 years, Robert's entire identity was tethered to his deal flow. He funded an incredible life for his family, but his physical hardware was heavily compromised. He was carrying 40 pounds of excess weight, his blood pressure was elevated, and he was completely disconnected from his wife and kids. When the sale closed, the money hit his account. But without the daily adrenaline of the deals to prop him up, his exoskeleton was removed. He felt entirely empty and physically weak. He applied for a system diagnostic, and we initiated the voluntary stripping process. I pulled him out of the boardroom and put him under the barbell. We removed the financial metrics and focused entirely on his physiological metrics. We forced his central nervous system to adapt to raw physical stress. We also addressed his communication at home, shifting him from buying his wife's tolerance to leading her with his character and his newly built physical presence. Within 6 months, the transformation was undeniable. He dropped the excess weight, optimized his endocrine system, and completely changed his kinetic posture. When he walked into a room, the energy shifted. Not because people knew his net worth, but because his biological presence demanded respect. He built the man to match the empire. Let's look at the next phase of this physical and emotional rebuild. Once you have voluntarily stepped outside the armor and subjected your body to raw physical adaptation, you run an intrinsic audit. This is where you evaluate your presence in your own home and your boardroom, entirely independent of your checkbook. You sit down with your wife, and you sit down with a trusted, highly capable peer. And you ask a direct, incredibly clarifying question. Where can I step up and lead with my actual physical and emotional presence, rather than just providing capital? You take the feedback and you absorb the data calmly, keeping your nervous system perfectly regulated. Then you elevate the mechanics of your relationships. You do the heavy foundational work of leading with your character. When friction arises in your marriage, you meet it with absolute composure. You plant your feet, regulate your breathing, and actively lower your resting heart rate. You provide your wife with a grounded, regulated nervous system to anchor to, which is exactly what female biology responds to. When you lead your executive team, you inspire execution because your physical and emotional presence naturally demands a higher standard of excellence. You walk into the room knowing your body and your mind are the true assets. You project a quiet, undeniable authority because your physiological baseline is incredibly strong. This is the biological reality of a truly sovereign man. He has the capital, but the capital does not have him. You have the opportunity to run a physiological diagnostic on your own foundation tonight. Picture the man you're building underneath the suit. A man whose kinetic chain is fully optimized, whose endocrine system is balanced, and whose emotional composure is unshakable. Rebuilding this underlying muscle, restoring your physical readiness, optimizing your hormones, and reclaiming your baseline is the most highly leveraged work you will ever execute. When you anchor your nervous system to your own intrinsic capability, you unlock a level of operational freedom that money simply cannot buy. You build the man to match the empire. Go to coachkuz.com and apply for the Resurrection Strategy Call. I will be your red team. We will forensically audit your physiological baseline. We will locate exactly where your true capacity lies, and we will install the foundational architecture of the Resurrection Protocol to rebuild your intrinsic, undeniable power. Rebuild the machine. Resurrect the man. I am Acusio Bivona, and I will see you in the work.